really helped create an authentic connection with my children and created a more peaceful family dynamic between us all. The way that you parent really makes a massive difference to your overall peace in your family life and happiness within your children, and the mutual respect you have between each other makes a massive, massive world of difference. Okay, let's get into it. The first one is to pause before you respond. And when I say this, I mean when there's a conflict, between siblings, or when you're having a conflict with your child and you're trying to decide the best way to respond. It's so normal and easy for us to get into a habit to react the moment we feel something and the moment that we have something pop in our head and how to react, as opposed to pausing and reflecting and figuring out what's the best way to respond before you do so. It is totally okay and normal and healthy to take a breath in between your reactions, because it's within those little pauses that we often find clarity in the most healthful and mature way to respond that's going to be best for you and your kids. It's very easy to overreact when you don't take a moment to pause. So sometimes I'll find myself, or Andrew will find himself, in a place where we want to overreact to a situation. But when we pause, we're able to decide for ourselves if it's worth it to make this a serious issue. So I'll give you an example. If two of my children are in an argument and they're getting really loud and really rowdy, and at first you're kind of just letting them handle their argument because you're busy doing something else in the kitchen or wherever you are, but then it gets louder and louder and it gets to a place where you need to intervene. It's easy, especially if you're feeling impatient in the moment because you haven't had a shower that day, there's a big mess in the kitchen or in the whole house, and you have other things on your mind and you're just really busy. It's easy to react impatiently and overreact to the situation and to almost make things worse. So if you don't pause in between that moment and you just run up to them and start yelling at them like, stop arguing, get to your room, you in that room, you in that room, or like, you're losing this, and just react with like a punishment, saying that you don't know TV for a week, as an example. Looking back at that later, outside of the moment, when you have taken care of yourself and you've gotten your shower and you're feeling more at peace and more patient, you can realize that maybe that wasn't the most beneficial way to react. And if we pause in between those moments, so instead of running up to our children and exploding on them, that's a funny way to say that, we can take a breath and think, okay, what exactly is happening here? What's the healthiest way to respond? And if you just give yourself, 10, 20 seconds, 5 seconds, even that extra 5 seconds really makes a difference to just help you collect yourself and walk over maturely to help delegate and handle the situation. So I like to let my kids work out their own arguments a lot of the times, but there are some times that delegation can be really helpful. So coming up to my children in a calm way, because I've had a moment to collect myself and realize, okay, yes, I'm feeling stressed right now. I'm feeling like I have a lot on my plate and a lot to do, and I really wish they were arguing right now, but I can come over calmly and respond maturely. So I can come up to them, get on their level, and help them learn how to express their emotions and their feelings to each other respectfully and calmly. If I go over there and I explode on them, I'm adding to that stress and I'm just making things louder myself. Instead, if I can be a calming presence for my kids, I can help teach them how to stay calm even when they're stressed and how to express their emotions through clear, calm words. And once they can share how they're feeling, it's much easier to negotiate and help resolve things. So that's just one little example of pausing in between those moments can really make a world of difference. The second habit is to only say what you mean. It can be very easy to just manipulate and threaten your way through parenting to get your children to comply and to do what you want them to do, which is not going to create good, authentic connection. They're going to feel dictated to. They're going to feel like you don't care about their feelings, and they won't feel respected, because the reality is, children are people now. I've said this a lot when I talk about parenting. They're not people later, they're people now, and people do not like to be disrespected. People want to feel like their opinions matter. They want to feel like the other person that they're speaking to cares about their feelings as well, no matter how silly the feeling might be that you think. So when I say only say what you mean, I mean to avoid threats. Don't say empty threats, especially if your children are doing something that they're not supposed to be doing and you feel like you've given them a couple warnings and they're just not listening. And then once they're still not listening, on top of all those reminders, instead of giving an empty threat like no TV for a month, like what are the chances you're really gonna follow through with no TV for a month? You shouldn't be saying things that you're not gonna follow through with, because then your word doesn't have as much weight to it and they won't trust you or believe what you say. Boundaries are very important and you have to follow through with those boundaries. So be very careful with what you say. Don't give an exaggerated claim if you're not going to follow through with it. It can be tempting to make a claim bigger than something that you'll follow through with simply because you want them to comply. That, for one, is not going to create an authentic connection, and like I said, they're not going to trust your word because you know you're not going to follow through with those big threats. Instead, avoiding threats in general is very helpful because think about your relationship with your children in a way that you have a relationship with anyone. Of course, every relationship with different people is different. So your relationship with your friends is completely different than your relationship with your partner, is completely different than your relationship with your children, is completely different than your relationship with your parents. But all of these relationships are with other people, and people do not like to be threatened. Can you imagine any good relationship having threats within those relationships? So telling a friend or a partner that if you don't do X, Y, or Z, then I'm gonna do X, Y, or Z. Threats are not the way to go to foster good connection, and long term, the relationship will suffer. The goal is for your children to respect you and for you to respect them back, for there to be mutual respect, because that is going to create a much more stronger bond, and your children will listen and respect you and obey the rules when you are kind and respectful to them. So when you are teaching your children and helping them learn through a problem or through a situation where they're not listening to rules, I encourage you to get on their level and explain to your children, problem solve, work things out with them, listen to their feelings, and help them to want to make the connection to make a change themselves. Now, it's totally easier said than done. I totally understand this because that takes longer. That type of parenting takes so much longer. And often, or sometimes I hear people saying that positive parenting is like lazy parenting. There is a massive difference between passive parenting and proactive positive parenting. Passive parenting, let your children walk all over you, there are no rules, your children just do whatever they want. That is not positive proactive parenting. Positive proactive parenting actually takes much more work than empty threats or even threats that aren't empty but are full, and you follow through with threats to try to get your children to comply because they're afraid. Wouldn't it be so much better to get your children to want to listen to you and to be respectful because they want to inside, not because they're afraid of their parent unleashing their power on them? Does that make sense? Obviously that's figuratively. So it takes much more work, and it definitely takes time to get on their level and to help solve a problem without creating threats. But the long-lasting relationship is so much better, and your long-lasting experience with your children is that they will respect you, and later experiences that you have with them will go much smoother, and it will just be so much easier because it will be a wonderful, fruitful relationship where they want to listen to you and they care about your feelings too. So yeah, that's my advice for that. Avoid empty threats and only say what you mean. So if you're not gonna follow through with something, then don't say it. Oh, and to finish off that point, if you do get into a situation where you do end up saying something that you don't mean and you realize you created too big of a discipline, you can always express the mistake that you made to your children. That's always better. I definitely recommend owning up to your mistakes and expressing that to your kids. Which brings me to number 3, apologize when you make a mistake. I cannot stress this enough. This is a very, very important one. Your children need to see you apologize when you make a mistake, because that will teach them to apologize when they make mistakes. I know I've talked about this many times before, but when they see you humbling yourself and willing to admit to them that you've made a mistake and you're sorry and will you forgive me and I will work on this better next time, that totally teaches them to humble themselves when they've made mistakes too. They feel respected when they see you getting on their level and not expecting something greater within themselves than you're able to do. So a really good example is how often we are appalled when children will throw a tantrum or smack a wall or something. It's very normal for parents to want to stamp that out of children, but then they kind of forget that adults do this too. Have you never overreacted before? I think it's important to have grace for your children, to not expect more from them than you can even do yourselves, and when you make a mistake, to apologize. I've actually found multiple times in my family dynamics that when I'm having a conflict with one of my children, and both of us might be in the wrong, like maybe I overreacted and he overreacted or she overreacted, and we're just having these frustrated feelings through whatever the disagreement is about, I found that being the first one to apologize myself, to own up for what my mistake was, really helps them to apologize thereafter and to own up to their mistake as well. It doesn't always happen, and it's really important not to apologize to try to get them to apologize. The point of apologizing is exactly that, to apologize, not to manipulate, to try to get them to do something. And when you're being authentic in your apology and not expecting something from them, that makes a world of difference too, because they can tell a difference. Children are very, very smart and very intuitive. They can definitely sense when you're being authentic and when you're not. Okay, the next one is to empathize and to put yourself in their shoes. It's completely normal to have a hard time empathizing when your toddler really wants the blue cup instead of the red cup, when you've already poured the said drink in the blue cup and they really want the red cup and you're like, it's really not worth it, why is it a big deal? But it's important to empathize with your kids and to work on that on all their different ages, because there's many times where us as parents, we're really busy, we have a lot going on in our lives, and sometimes you're like, can you just listen and follow the rules so that we can just have a peaceful life and keep going? But then they're saying, no, I really want this, and you're not listening to me, and you're not caring about my feelings. And it's important to just stop and be like, okay, wait a second. They have feelings too. And something a lot of people don't really realize is that children are told what to do a majority of their lives. They have very little say in what they get to do all day, every day. They're told to eat your breakfast, brush your teeth, go to school, do this, come back, do homework, and all these types of logical but like routine type things in their lives that they want to have some control in their life. And when there's something that they disagree with that you're choosing to do, they want to see that you care about their feelings. And in order to really understand why they're really upset at something, try your best to put yourself in their shoes. It's really good to get on their level and really let them have their feelings and let them just feel it with you and experience your love around them no matter what their feelings are, before you try to help them handle their emotions healthily and more calmly. Because once they feel like you're empathizing and that you care about their feelings, they're much more likely to be receptive to your guidance and how to remain calm in all that they're feeling. The next one is to make time for playtime every single day. I don't know about you, but I have a very busy life, and I'm sure a lot of you do too as parents, but it's very easy for me to put play on the back burner and just assume my kids will play fine by themselves while I get the chores done in the house and our work done ourselves. But children really appreciate quality time. Children rest in your love when you play with them, and they feel like you really love them and enjoy spending time with them when you play with them. So carving out time every day to do what they want to do is so beneficial to your overall family life and your relationship. So that could be a board game or playing outside if it's warm weather for you where you are at the time of year that you're at, or it could be cooking together or baking muffins together, or that could be playing dress up or building some awesome Lego set together. Whatever it is that they want to do, play with them what they want to play. And if you have multiple children, I think it's really helpful too to carve out time for each kid to be alone with each kid throughout the month. So pick a date where you're able to spend time with just the one child while your other children are doing something else that's preoccupying them, or if they're with friends, or they're doing some kind of school study, or they're with your partner if you have a partner. But being able to rotate and carve time out for just one child to do what they want to do throughout the month, even if it's just like a 30-minute date to go grab some food together, or even if that means staying at the house together but just doing what they want to do for an hour, that will be so beneficial to your relationship and is only going to foster and grow your love together. The next one is to affirm them when disciplining. This one might seem kind of counterproductive for some people, but I firmly believe in positive affirmations. That's definitely my love language. So if there's something I need to learn and my husband wants to help me grow in a certain area, I am much more willing and able to be receptive to his guidance or his advice when he affirms me through what he's explaining to me. And the same thing goes when I want to help him in some way as well. If I come up to my husband and there's something that I want him to work on, or something that I think we can grow on together as a couple, and if I start criticizing him and saying how bad he is at this one X, Y, or Z thing, and I wish you would do this, why don't you do this, and being very accusatory, it's not gonna go very well. He's definitely not gonna be receptive to my thoughts. But if I come to him with gentle, loving appreciation for all he does for us and affirm his efforts, for instance, Andrew is very good at keeping the kitchen clean and spotless and cleaning up. He's just really good at cleaning. I'm more particular about tidiness. And there's times when he cleans the kitchen, but then he'll leave the dish towel all crumpled up together and all wet after he's done cleaning. And for some reason that bugs me. I would much rather the dish towels be hung up on a drying rack so they can dry more easily. If I went up to him and said, "Oh, why do you always clump up the dish towels? It's so annoying. Can you please just hang it up?" He's more likely to respond just being annoyed at me finding a way to criticize something as opposed to being thankful for him cleaning the kitchen. So instead, if I come up to him and say, "Thank you so much for cleaning the kitchen," and give him a kiss and say, "It looks so nice in here," do you think whenever you do some cleaning, you can hang up the dish towels instead of like crumpling them on the counter? And then explain. He's so much more likely to respond politely and respectfully and be receptive to what I have to say. And the same goes for children. I think it's so important to remind ourselves that children are doing their very best. Children want to please you. They want to please those around them, and they want to do good. It's easy to forget that because children make a lot of mistakes just like adults do, and children have developing brains, and there's a lot that they need to work on to grow. But it's important to see their humanity and to see how hard they really are working at doing a good job, and remind yourself of that when you are helping children grow and disciplining. A great example that I see far too often in public places and people that I've been around in my life is that I sometimes see parents overreacting to toddlers and trying to discipline 1 and 2-year-olds or even 3-year-olds. And the way that they're disciplining them is almost as if they think their children are trying to upset them on purpose, or they think their children are trying to do wrong on purpose, which mass majority of the time is just not true, especially when you're talking about this toddler age. Getting down on your children's level and helping them learn what to do instead, giving them little tips and tricks how to navigate through life in a polite way, and affirming them and saying, "Wow, I see that you're trying so hard." Okay, here's a great example. You're in the other room and you're busy doing something else, and then you hear the sink turn on in the kitchen. And you're like, "What is that?" And you go over into the kitchen and you see your 2-year-old up on a little step stool in the kitchen making a gigantic mess. The water is everywhere, it's spilling all over the sink. They've just got all of the clean dishes on the dry rack back into the sink and wet again, and you want to react and get mad and say, "Why are you making such a mess? Get down from there." And sometimes parents scold a 2-year-old over that type of thing, which I definitely don't recommend. It's important to see your child is trying to do good. They see that you're in the kitchen and cleaning, and they want to help and clean too. Or the other factor is that they're just really interested in water and want to play in the water, and it's so innocent, like when we're talking about little kids. So instead I would say, go up to your child, see what they're doing in the kitchen, and say, "Oh, I see you're trying to help me in the kitchen. Wow, thank you so much for trying to help." And then I would say, "Let me help you clean this up. There's a little mess over here. And this is how we do this." Instead of yelling at your child for making a big mess, affirm them in what their intentions are, and then guide them and teach them on how to be more clean and how to make less of a mess next time. Or you can get them down, help clean them up, wipe them up, and say, "Okay, we can't be in the kitchen right now. Next time, I need you to ask me when you want to help in the kitchen so I can help you, and we'll do it together. So don't go up into the kitchen, into the sink without my help. Can you do that for me next time?" And every child is different. Some children have completely different temperaments, but my experience is that my little children, my toddlers, are so receptive to that when they see that you see the good intentions that they had. And the same goes for older children. I mean, I could give a good example for older kids, is that if your oldest child is trying to discipline their younger sibling, like trying to intervene, which I've seen a lot of times happens where the older kid kind of mimics and copies what the parents do when it comes to littler kids and trying to get them not to do something, but then sometimes it just isn't executed right because they're not the parent. So instead of saying, "Hey, stop intervening, just go away," or "don't get involved," and being negative in that regard, you could instead say, "I see that you're trying to help me and I really appreciate that. Next time you see your brother or sister doing this, instead of trying to tell them what they need to do or pulling them away or picking them up, just come tell me and I'll come grab them. Thank you so much though for trying. I really appreciate that." And that generally makes a world of difference. And they're gonna be way more receptive to that. The next one is to pick your battles and don't sweat the small stuff. This one is a really important one. It's a delicate one to balance. It's one that you really want to think through and pause before you respond. This is where the pausing before you respond tip really comes in handy, because you can really decide what's worth it and what's not. If you find yourself dictating over every little thing your child does wrong, they're gonna feel really, really, really discouraged. They are, like I said, trying to do their best. So sometimes you have to let go the little children arguments and let them work it out on their own and don't get involved. And sometimes it's not gonna work out perfectly. And sometimes if they're, for instance, jumping on the bed, that's one thing where my husband has a rule, don't jump on the bed. But for me, I just don't get it. I'm like, what is the big deal? If they have clean feet, like, can we just let them jump on the bed? It's not really worth it to me. That's one of those things. That's like an example of me and Andrew's like different parenting styles. But obviously you want to be on the same page. But that's a great example of like, for me, I would say is a small thing. There's not really much to say on this one other than you're gonna find the balance for yourself on what isn't worth it and what is. You know, some things you don't need to make a big issue. I just feel like that's helpful. And giving your children freedom in life, as much freedom as you can without crossing boundaries that are important for your family, is really helpful for them. They want to be free. Children want to feel free, just like you do. The next one is to encourage self-sufficiency. This one is really helpful to start at a young age, and especially if you have controlling tendencies, it can be easy to forget to let your children do things on their own because you want to just take control and make sure there's no mess involved, and you think, I'll just do it better, just let me do it. But if you don't let them practice things from a young age, then they're not gonna be very good at it as they get older. So you have to kind of sometimes bite your tongue when they're making their own breakfast. It's gonna get messy, but the more that they practice and the more guidance you give them in calm, polite ways, the more that they will learn, and before you know it, they will be making their breakfast all on their own, and it will be totally clean and spotless at the end of their meal prep. And then there's multiple benefits. Your life will be easier because you're not gonna be making breakfast for every single kid, and you're gonna be able to just relax a little bit more because they're more self-sufficient. They can make their own bed, they can clean their own room, they can get themselves dressed on their own, they can make their own food. And then also, they're gonna feel empowered. And the more empowered that they feel, the more respected they feel, the more respect they're gonna feel for themselves. That's gonna ooze out into whoever they are engaging with. And they are going to be respectful and kind human beings, the more empowered they feel. Give your children options and let them choose for themselves all different kinds of things that you yourself would like to choose if you were in their shoes. And even though when they're learning to be self-sufficient in a lot of ways, like brushing their own teeth and tying their own shoes and going to get the mail themselves and all different kinds of things, it can be harder in the beginning because you're giving them a lot of guidance and it might take a little longer at first, but in the long run, you're gonna be having self-sufficient kids at a very young age, and your life is gonna be much easier, and they're also gonna be a lot happier for it too. The next one is to teach your children the art of negotiation. Now this one might not be popular for some parents, but I have found it immensely helpful for me and my children's relationship. For us, it's very important to not give our children what they want when they're screaming or throwing a fit, because that just encourages that behavior more. We will listen to their feelings when they're screaming, let them have their moment, and then we help teach them how to express their feelings in a calmer, more productive way next time. And we also tell them that doesn't mean that mom and dad are gonna change their mind every time, but there is a chance that sometimes we will change our mind if you put forth compelling arguments, and that always has to happen respectfully and calmly. There are a lot of times where I'm gonna say no to something that they're requesting, and I am convinced that no is the answer here. But if my children have good negotiation skills, and if my children have convincing arguments, and they're respectful and calm in the way that they converse with me, I am much more likely to change my mind. Elvis in particular is very good at negotiating. He has very compelling arguments. A lot of times when I've initially said no to something, he's helped me change my mind because I listen to his feelings and he has good arguments. And I think that's great. I think it's wonderful for children to feel empowered in that way, that they know that they have a voice at the table. They have a voice in the family and their opinion matters. And if they put forth compelling and good arguments towards something in a respectful way, that helps us to change our mind a lot of times. Learning negotiation skills and healthy argument skills is so helpful for their adult life. There are many kids who grow up never learning how to negotiate and how to handle healthy arguments and disagreements, and then when they get older and have adult relationships, they don't know how to negotiate, to be able to come through good conclusions that often minds can be changed when there's a healthy discussion there. So I think it's a really important skill for children to learn, and since a lot of the times we do change our mind when they have good reasons, they are more likely to listen to our rules when we do keep our no to be a no, because they know that we're serious and that our choice to have the answer be a no is an important one. They listen to us because we listen to them, and it's this wonderful dance that really works out in the long run. It's a lot of work in the beginning, but as they get older, man, it has really flourished and helped our relationships with our children. And the last one is something that I've kind of mentioned throughout this video, but I want to emphasize again as a whole point, is to get on their level. Getting on your children's level and being eye to eye is immensely helpful for your children to not feel like you're towering over them. When you get down on their level, especially for younger kids, like for 2, 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds even, and look them in the eye, listen to their feelings and their emotions, they're gonna be able to express how they're feeling as you nod and you hear their feelings, and then they're more likely to listen and be receptive back to what you have to say. And I know I have so many parallels with like other relationships and people in your life, but isn't this true with other people in your life? If you're trying to express your feelings that you're having, let's say you're having a really hard moment and you're having big emotions and you're trying to express this to a friend or your partner. Now imagine your partner scoffing it off, not listening, walking around the house while you're trying to express your feelings about something and kind of just saying, get over it, stop crying. Like that generally does not make things better. That generally kind of adds to the hurt and makes things worse. And of course, everything we feel is our choice to feel what we feel. As adults, we know this, and this is something that we can choose to feel on ourselves, but it is definitely helpful when your partner and friends and people in your life are respectful and caring about your feelings and really listen to you. It helps you move through the emotions and the feelings quicker. And children are definitely the same way. So those are my tips. I hope you find these really helpful and that you feel encouraged throughout this day. I feel encouraged when I remind myself of these tips because none of us are perfect. Andrew and I are not perfect. We make mistakes on the regular, and these reminders are really helpful to just keep throughout my day in my head. Anyways, I will see you next video, and I'll see you next time.